Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us here at Frontiers International Plainfield Area Club for another edition in our Westry Horne Cultural and Heritage Lecture Series. The Frontiers Plainfield Area Club, as you know, brings this content to you so that we can continue to empower and educate our communities on the long-standing impacts of our history, and of course, the need for us to really connect with our history and our lineage so that we can continue to cultivate excellence wherever it is that we might be. Frontiers International Plainfield Area Club stands for advancement through service. And this is one of the ways that we render service unto our community so that we can continue to further the advancement of our people. I am Safir Jenkins, your president, and it gives me great privilege and joy to bring our special guest today, who will be our lecturer and provide you with some key insights into the importance of knowing your culture and your lineage and why that matters. Briefly, as by way of announcement, I want to share that Frontiers International Plainfield Area Club provides advancement through service through programs like this. And every year through our scholarship and educational programs, we help provide opportunities for local young people who wish to further their educational attainment, as well as their pursuits of success and career beyond high school. If you would like to partner with us and donate to our scholarship fund or any of these service programs, you can do so by visiting bit.ly/Plainfield Frontiers donate. We will be showing that banner throughout the broadcast. So if you ever need to revisit or hear that information again, it will be presented to you accordingly. In the meantime, by way of announcement and introduction from the Westry Horne Cultural and Heritage Lecture Series, we bring you today Why Knowing Your Culture and Lineage Matters with Queen Mother Imakhu. Ordained African Liberation Theologian, Reverend Queen Mother Imakhu brings an energetic blend of scholarship, cultural education, inspirational storytelling, and practical living skills to help her motivational lectures and keynote addresses be furthered and impactful in the lives of those who listen. Her passion for performing and teaching culture drives her calling in this important mission. She celebrates honest cultural reclamation. Queen Mother Imakhu's ordinations and initiations include Healing Mother Minister from 1995, Interfaith Minister 1999, Double Ankh carrying Kemetic High Priestess 2004, High Priestess in Hand-Maiden of Nubia 2003, Kemetic Queen Mother 2005, Nganga 2006, Kemetic UAS Staff Carrying Elder 2013, and Manbo Asogwe 2023. Queen Mother Imakhu is Chief Facilitator for the Newark Brick City ASCAC, that is Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations, weekly study group in Newark, New Jersey. As a columnist, she wrote for First World News, Paint Magazine, and Nubia News. She was also the very first Black woman to own her own 24/7 Black Consciousness Internet radio station, Akeru New African Network. As an activist, Queen Mother is a member of the Justice and Unity Campaign, People's Organization for Progress, United Parks as One, and New York City's WBAI-FM Pacifica Radio Listener Station Board. Queen Mother Imakhu's maternal U.S. lineage traces back to the 1600s through the historic, formerly enslaved Kate Anderson, Hester Anderson artist family. She talks about the impact of discovering her maternal Latin, Caribe, Creole heritage, deliberately hidden, yet persistent through culture. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming to the broadcast Queen Mother Imakhu herself, Reverend Queen Mother.
Peace and blessings. How are you today?
Very well. Peace and blessings to you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
A lot, right? That's the truncated version.
Well, your reputation certainly precedes you, and we are grateful to have you today. It is definitely going to be a treat for all of our listeners, and I'm
grateful to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I will leave you in the very capable hands of Queen Mother Imakhu.
Well, I would like to let everybody know that this is an interactive session, and it is my understanding that generally the questions are held until the end, but I'm used to on my podcast, Shenu Living, having people interact throughout. Robin Spencer, Sister Robin, how are you? I give thanks and praise. That is my POP sister. POP is in the house. Give thanks. And so, yeah, I'm used to having interaction. So please feel free to drop your questions as we go along the way, because this is about us. It is not about me. This is about our journey in finding ourselves, reclaiming ourselves, and how to do that, and sharing the story, because it is about the story. I've had a career as a storyteller, whether it has been through my career as a musician, a vocalist, a dancer, a poet. As a storyteller, the term sageti is the familiar term in the Kemetic language for somebody who is a cultural preservationist or a cultural custodian. And that means we use all of those forms in order to reclaim what is ours, the lineage, through the words, the importance of telling who we are, who we were, where we're going, making sure that we correctly document who we are, who we were, and where we're going. And so that it is through our filter, so that others are not telling our story incorrectly. And you see right now, we are battling to hold on to our version of the story, especially because of everything that we have been through in reclaiming what has been lost to us. We see that there are those who are going to see the movie Sinners. We're going to get to that. And folks who leave the theater frustrated because they see images on the screen that they can't understand, because this was our culture. This is our culture, and many can't get what's there. Those clues that are on the screen that are for us to get. Some who refuse to accept that these images are for us to get, because they have unfortunately been brainwashed into believing that these images are evil. Just very simple images, and yet complex, but they belong to us. And then there are those who have been immersed in the reclamation of African traditional religions and understand what the imagery is all about. I have to tell you, I was able to pick up boom, 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 boom. That represents this. That's this. Ooh, they put that in. That's good. That means this. And have had people reach out to me to say, please explain to me, because I want to know. This is really good. And this is why it's important to use media today to help us to tell the story, to reclaim what was taken from us. I'm going to start out with libation. Many of us have become familiar with what libation is about because we have reclaimed this practice of pouring libation on various levels. This has been a difficult practice because there are many who still don't understand, who still believe that it is evil and don't really quite get what it is. Others who think that it is ancestor worship and don't really think that it is something we should be doing, and who don't understand that it doesn't make it worship. It is a link. It is a remembrance. It is a way of showing our ancestors you are not forgotten. And in fact, I remember years ago when I was performing up in Cape Cod, there were these sisters who hired me to go up there and do a performance, but also knew that I was immersed in our culture. And they had some discord amongst them because they wanted to put up an ancestor altar, but they weren't sure what to call it because some were thinking that this was evil. So they decided that it would be acceptable if they called it a memory table. And so this one sister said, "Do you think that's okay?" I said, "Go with it. Go with it." And so they did. And they came up with an alternate term for pouring libation and asked me if they could find a more acceptable way without it being thought of some conjuring stuff, okay? And so it was decided, well, if they would just call out the names of those in their family that they loved, and also people in history that they thought were respectable, okay? And so it was a good compromise, because after all, it basically is what pouring libation is. And as you get into different spaces where people are relaxing more about pouring libation, and when people are understanding it is not worshiping ancestors, it is connecting with ancestors. And then we get more comfortable with looking back into some of the ancient writings where it says, in a book that has become more acceptable, the Hosea, where it has selected writings from ancient Kemet, which was the original name of Egypt, and where now it has become more acceptable to wear the Ankh, which is a symbol of life and is not considered to be evil. And you go into churches and you see people wearing Ankhs along with their crosses because they understand that this is the original cross. Or maybe some have not gotten that far, but that's okay, because at least it's acceptable. And over the last 20, 25 years, you see more of that, okay? And where you will see, excuse me, I have to put my glasses on here. And I see that's been put on the screen, remembrance and connection. In many African cultures and traditions, pouring libation is a fundamental way to give homage, respect, and recognition to ancestors who have passed. It's seen as an invitation for them to participate, yes, in present events, and a way to maintain a connection between the living and the dead. Thank you for sharing that. And let me share the most ancient text that exists regarding that. In the book of Ani, where it says, pour libation for your father and mother who rest in the valley of the dead. God will witness your action and accept it. Do not forget to do this, even when you are away from home. For as you do for your parents, your children will do for you also. And then, as you become more comfortable and you want to know, well, where did that verse come from? And that's a truncated version out of the book of Ani. And then you find out that there is a longer version. And you begin to do your scholarly work. And you find out there are more verses regarding your connection with your ancestors and respect for your ancestors and remembering them. It is remembrance, and it is the African way, and it is acceptable. It is considered respect, and especially at this time when we are doing reclamation work in connection for and with and to our ancestors. We recognize that it is vital and it is necessary. Let us pour libation to our ancestors. And usually, I ask for everyone to remember those who have been a bright light in your family, those who have shown you the way to live, those who have been bright in your community, those who have contributed to your family, to your community, to our world. And they remind us that this is how we should be, being people of good character. Okay? And so, we remember first those in our maternal bloodline. And let us speak their names as we pour. And I call the last names of my mother's bloodline first: Simmons, Blackman, Pridgeon, Exon. And then my grandfather's bloodline: Whitley, Artist, Ortiz, Anderson. And then my father's bloodline: Lloyd, Yates, McLaughlin, Myers, Murray. And remembering also for my stepfather, who was a wonderful father figure, Mayfield. And now let us remember those who in history, particularly as we're coming up on the 100th anniversary of Malcolm X and his transition. Speak the names. Speak the names. And since we're in a virtual space, you can please post them so they can be shared. Call the names. Call the names. Call the names. Call the names for all those who have shed blood in our struggle. Call the names. 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 And we remember you. As we speak your names, as we think thoughts of you, we say thank you. Modukwe duawu. And as we finish at the end of this broadcast, I will take this water outside and pour it into the tree that is outside, and showing that the cycle continues as we pour into the roots, because you gave us roots. And as the branches reach up to the sky, it also shows that you continue to give us our roots and wings. Ashe. Give thanks and praise. Horne libation shows that there is continuation. Calling the names shows that there is continuation. Today we're focused on the importance of remembering culture and also remembering lineage, the continuation of lineage. There's a story I want to share with you. And I found it in this book years ago, African Mythology. As a storyteller, and I want to let you know, there are many words for storyteller. There is griot, there is Sajeti, there is, there are so many. And actually, these indicate people who are they're not just entertainers. And certainly storytelling was a form of entertainment that was provided for the family, for the village. But it was much more than that, because storytelling was a way of sharing the morals that were expected for children to follow in a village, but also for adults to remember how they were expected to conduct themselves. They were a way of being able to remind people of the lineage, because you were expected to remember the names of the families and also the stories that went along with them, so that future generations could remember. Also, to tell the stories of the politics that were going on in the village. So much more. They were like the herald. They were kind of like the news. But also they would serve as the mediators. They held a very important role. They would be the poets, the musicians, but they held a great deal of weight. They weren't just entertainers, much, much more. Yes. But in passing down the stories, in the same way, for those of you who are familiar with the Pataki in the Yoruba line of spiritual African beliefs, they held morals. They also would foretell what was going to happen. If you had oracle and a particular story would come up, then you were to examine that story and see who you were in the story and realize that this was a prediction of what was going to happen. Okay? But again, also, they would tell you, think about this story. Okay? So, in this particular book, I found this story about a frog and an antelope. Now, antelope was not too particularly bright. And because of that, he would try to find ways to get over on people, simply because of the fact that he knew he wasn't too swift. So he was kind of a bully. Now, there was Mr. Frog, who was extremely intelligent. But, you know, he was small. Still, he knew how to work his way around the situation. In this case, Mr. Antelope really wanted a pot of beer really badly. So he approached Mr. Frog and he said, you know what? I'm going to challenge you to a race. And whoever loses owes the winner a pot of beer. And he took off. Now, of course, he was so much bigger than Mr. Frog. And naturally, he won. So Mr. Frog said, well, you know, that really wasn't fair. How about you give me a chance to win that back? How about, can I show you the way that I'm always able to become abundant? Well, see, Mr. Antelope was pretty greedy too. So he was like, really? He said, yeah. So he said, follow me. So Mr. Frog went inside his little house and he had his wife go inside with him. And he lit a match and the house went up in flames. And don't you know, he and his wife disappeared with the flames. Everybody in their little neighborhood, they were so sad because they really loved Mr. Frog and Mrs. Frog. And they were so angry at the antelope because a silly bet caused them to lose their lives. So Mr. Antelope was like, yo, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. Several months went by and the rainy season came. So, you know, they went through the dry season together, but now it was the rainy season. And Antelope went over to the water's edge and he was lapping up some water. And all of a sudden he hears all of this singing. And he looks up and he sees Mr. Frog there with his wife and all these little frog children. The antelope says, what are you doing? Mr. Frog says, we are singing. He said, no, I mean, what are you doing? What are you doing here? You died. He said, yes, but we've returned from the land of the dead. He said, but you died. And you doing all, we have all these kids. He said, yes. Don't you see how the God of the land of the dead blessed us? And we're happy because the rains came. And so we thought we would come back from the land of the dead and sing. And Mr. Antelope was so jealous. He said, you got other kids from the land of the dead? He said, yes. So Mr. Antelope said, he got all those kids from the land of the dead. He said, well, I need to do the same thing. So he went home. He told his wife, come on in the house. He lit his house on fire, and Mr. Frog sat back and watched as the house and the antelope and his wife all were set ablaze. Well, the neighbors weren't too unhappy because they didn't like Mr. Antelope anyway. So there is a piece that was missing out of that story that Mr. Antelope didn't have. What was that piece? Anybody have an answer to that? Think about that for a moment. I'll tell you what he didn't have. He was missing a piece of information. He was unaware of the fact that frogs hibernate. Robin. Robin said suicide envy. The piece of information that he was missing was the fact that frogs naturally hibernate. So, see now, when you don't have the whole story, that can be highly detrimental. Yes, frogs burrow in the mud. You can really hurt yourself when you don't have the full story. Now, think about what's happened to us as a people because we have not had the full story. I'll tell you for myself. You know, I've known bits and pieces of my own heritage, and I did not know how rich my own heritage was until recent years. In fact, it was about 12, 13 years ago. My daughter, who had started doing genealogy research, called me and she said, Mommy, did you know that we have an ancestor who fought with Nat Turner? I said, what? Wow. And she said that she met a relative on Facebook who had been doing research for years on our family. And our name, Artist, came up in research. And our ancestor, Billy Artist, fought with Nat Turner. So it turns out that there were people in the family who knew and were trying to distance themselves from it. And those of us who were on the other side of that were really excited to find it out. And it also turned out that those of us who were excited were also activists. So that explained a lot. But then also, we found out, and years have been progressing, we've been finding out more and more, and those of us who've been doing research have linked up online. We've been finding each other. And I'm gonna tell you something. My father had said to me, because that's on my mother's side of the family, but I remember my father said to me back in the late 90s, when I had taken an African name, he called me one day and he said, listen, you know, this is just like a showbiz thing, right? And I said, no, Dad. And he said, but yeah, did you legally change your name? You know, and I said, no. He said, okay, well, just do me a favor. Always hold on to the name that you were born with. That way, family can always find you. And I said, okay, Dad, I promise. And I now understand because this was even before Facebook, you know. Now we've been able to find each other because of social media. Yeah. And everybody's got a piece of the story. And this is on both sides, whether it's my father's side or mother's side. And this is because we have family members who have been hiding pieces of our story as a matter of survival. You know, I have since found out that our artist's name was also originally Ortiz. Now, I suspected that this was true because I found an old picture online of an old family graveyard of ours going way, way back. The two oldest headstones were of men whose last names were Ortiz. Since then, we've also found out that we have Latin blood, Haitian blood, which also is considered technically Latin. That our blood, our DNA is, in Haiti, in the DR, which makes sense because, you know, it was considered Hispaniola back then, and, you know, all the same island. Also in Puerto Rico. Going further, on my grandmother's side, because that was my mother's father's side, and my grandmother's side in Brazil. And then I just found out a few days ago, as I was watching a podcast, which actually I follow, this brother is sharing information about our Anderson artist bloodline. And he's talking about the Virginia Creoles. And we're family. That was another piece of the puzzle. And he was talking about a particular part of the motherland and the connection there. And then he was talking about the Native American blood and so forth. But the main thing was the African connection. I mean, there's pieces, all these pieces connecting, you know? But then the main thing is the history about why it was hidden. And then also finding out that we have direct ties to Nat Turner. It's wow. I didn't know any of this growing up. And I understood as I learned more and more of our family story. We came through Virginia, North Carolina. I found out more about the South Carolinian roots on my father's side, where we're Gullah Geechee. And you find out pieces, you know, okay, so this one had to keep things hidden because he killed a man. You know, we came up north in connection with that, and, you know, all these different pieces. But you know what? If I had known any of this when I was growing up, the people I chose to partner with in life, I wouldn't have married any of them. I'd have had a different sense of worth, of self-worth. Yeah. You know, when you meet people who know who they are and are proud of who they are, you see that they carry themselves different ways. And they know their entire family story. Whole different way. When you learn more about your genealogy and the full story, you know, and you get the explanation about why this, and even in terms of the religions that we practice, there were things that I saw growing up I didn't have any explanation for, right? As I got more involved with seeking out the African traditional religions, as we call ATRs, and there was something that just drew me, right? Talking about the ancestral pull. And I started getting answers. Fulfillment. Mm-hmm. Any comments or questions so far? Robin says, this is beautiful because you know so much more than I do and others about our history. My limited knowledge includes pride from my deceased parents and grandparents, which is actually wonderful. Unfortunately, I don't know why. Well, see, that's so much right there. It's a lot. You know, there are people who are adopted who have like nothing to work with. They're fortunate if they're able to do research and get some paperwork and start the paper trail. Um, but then what if you have nothing? You know, it makes it so hard. I think it's beautiful that you have the grandparents. Listen, I was happy with that. I'm proud of my grandparents. My grandparents were no joke. Okay, they instilled a strong sense of pride in me. I don't want to throw that away at all. I grew up in Kenilworth, New Jersey. I was born and raised in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and then we moved to Kenilworth. I grew up seeing crosses burned, but my grandparents raised us. You know, my cousins and I grew up, you know, I lived with my parents, and then my folks split when I was 6. Um, but, you know, we were raised not to fear any man. Let me tell you a story. Some of you might have heard this story before, and I got to tell you, I shared my story last year with a fellow storyteller from across the country. He actually said that he heard some other storyteller tell my story. And he said to me, you know, I'm glad to hear you tell it and to find the source. That somebody else told it that like it was their story. Because, I mean, unfortunately, some storytellers will do that. But I guess it was such a juicy story, you know, and it sounds like a work of fiction, but this is my story. And I heard it from my mother and my aunt. So my grandparents had moved to North Carolina. You know, they were from North Carolina at this point. Family had relocated from Virginia. And you can look us up. If you look up Kate Anderson and Hester Anderson artists, you'll see that we were part of history, and I'll get to that story. But my grandparents had come up from from North Carolina to New Jersey. And they were sharecroppers. They came up north and made themselves business people. So they had this bar and restaurant. Well, they had a bar at first, and they wanted to expand it because actually the bar was taken from the town, from a little 2 square mile by 2 square mile Kenilworth, because they wanted to put a high school on it. So they took it. And so my grandparents were looking for another place to open and expand. And a councilman in town, this white councilman, told them, you'll reopen over my dead body. So they found a place over the railroad tracks where basically the Black community was. And they reopened and found a bigger location. They expanded. And so it was not just a bar, it was a bar and a little soul food place. And down the basement, they had a little banquet hall. Actually, it was a nice sized banquet hall. And the day that they reopened was on the day of this man's funeral, because he had dropped dead of a heart attack. True story. And in truth, I suspect it had something to do with some hoodoo. I found out later from my cousin that the family was engaged in hoodoo and voodoo. I found out that story on the very first Kwanzaa that I celebrated, when I invited my mother and my aunt, and my kids and I were celebrating. And so when we got to the point when I asked for family stories, that's the story that my mother and my aunt told. I said, "Is that a real story?" And they said, "Yeah," as they were sitting there just sipping on some juice. True story. Anyway, they were church going, God fearing people. Anyway. He called it his mouth OFO. So anyway, yeah, I didn't find out what all that stuff was about until much later. So anyway, yeah, and then when you find out about this stuff that's a part of your lineage, you know, and then at first when you're taught by society to fear it, and you know, our people did what they needed to do in order to overcome injustice. I'm just going to put it that way. For those of you who saw Sinners and didn't understand everything, I'm going to ask you to revisit it with a different set of eyes. And also, by the way, I'm going to be offering a class that is a video class, you know, that you can see at your leisure, that's called Embrace Your African Culture Without Being Misled. It is a class I've offered over the years from time to time. And with the with Sinners being out and with there being so much conversation about it, and with the conversations being so positive and affirming, and also the questions being addressed about with Black culture doing what you need to do at times in order to survive, and with people having the deeper conversations like this, you know, I figured it was time to do this class again. So pre-recorded, it'll be also with a lot of visuals. I love doing that kind of content. I decided not to do that tonight because as a storyteller, as a lecturer, and as an educator, I really wanted to just have earnest conversation tonight and give folks a chance to really think. You know, whenever I do my storytelling performances and my lectures also, I like to bring it back to a very honest place that our ancestors had, where it was just oral conversation, you know. So anyway, that class, and by the way, I'm offering it at half price for people who are on the lecture tonight. So if you're interested in the class, then you can just hit me up and just mention that you were here. So it's a 10-part series. And I love the opportunity to be able to dispel a lot of the myths that are associated with our culture so that we're able to fully reclaim it. I love reclamation and being able to make people less afraid, or to make people not afraid of what was ours. You know, it's a joy to be able to see people wearing these and not afraid of them. Like 20 years ago, people were terrified of this, and now people understand it's a symbol of life. It's life. How beautiful is that? It's life. Yeah. These are symbols of life. And also they represent wealth. These were given as wedding gifts. You know, they used to be used as money. Cowrie shells, you know. They meant, if you gave them to somebody getting married, it meant that you were wishing them a lot of wealth and a lot of children. Yeah. And let me just also say, oh, by the way, yeah, my ancestors are mentioned in this book, Unruly Women. Yeah. And, you know, there are other books that they're mentioned in because they were part of history. the mention of Kate Anderson and her children. My sixth great grandmother is Hester Anderson, artist, and that's the bloodline, the direct bloodline that we're from. That bloodline is significant because in 1670, which is the date that my seventh great grandmother, Kate Anderson, is said to be born. She was enslaved by Thomas Booker, and then his son, John Booker, freed her and her children. And the unheard of thing at that time was that upon his death, that's when he freed her, but also left her and her children 600, I think it was 40 acres of the land. And it was in court for a few years because the local enslavers were not having it. They did not want for their enslaved to find out and for there to be some kind of a riot and, for it to cause some kind of problem. So they got a lawyer and challenged their lawyer by offering 300 some odd acres over there. And it took some time to hash it out. But eventually, what they ended up deciding to do was to take the deal, but they didn't occupy. They just left. They just left. It was historic. The manumission laws were changed in Virginia because of that. So that's how many of them ended up going to North Carolina. Some of them went to Ohio, some went further out. Some stayed in Virginia and ended up intermarrying into the Nansemond, Nottoway people. But it's historic. You'll find it. You can Google it now. But some of them were considered those uppity Andersons. So some are mentioned in this book. And then others are in books written about free people of color. And then also because of the tie with Billy Artis, they're in books where he's mentioned. And we had no idea about any of this years, as much as little as 15 years ago. We didn't know this. We didn't know. But now, because of the internet and the fact that we're connecting, we're piecing up, all this together. And in fact, one of my cousins was recommended to contact me because she and her husband wanted to do a renewing of the vows. And she reached out to one of my Queen Mother colleagues because she wanted to have a Kemetic renewing of the vows ceremony. So this Queen Mother colleague said, I know just the person. She contacted me and said, listen, this couple wants to have this ceremony and I know that you can do it. So she contacted me. And so she asked me if I could also supply a bio. And in my bio, I mentioned this whole thing with my ancestry, right? And the next morning she said, Queen Mother, we're cousins. She said, you're an Anderson artist and so am I. So then she filled in information for me, right? I mean, so she told me what she knew and I told her what I knew. See, this is where it's beautiful because, the internet can be a blessing and a curse. So with connecting the different pieces of the puzzle, we're figuring out more and more about who we are, which is great. We didn't even know each other before. But because of the fact that we're each doing our own research, right? And then she patched me into her work, her lineage work that she had done on Ancestry.com, which is great because, Ancestry.com is expensive. It is. I think it's worth it on the one hand to pay a little bit, maybe for 1 or 2 months, get what you can, make as many screenshots as you can, and then save it and get off. Okay? Connect with as many family members as you can and get off. And then others will say, look, don't pay the money. I'm going to send you what I can, and we'll share it, right? And then there are other genealogy sites that are on there. Be careful, because some of them, if you give them your swab, then they're gonna do a bunch of other stuff with it. So be very careful. But also there are other African American sites on there that are reputable that you want to check into also. That's another thing to be very mindful of. You know, what are they going to do with your DNA? Okay. So, and then you want to make sure that you save your information in places where you're not going to be in peril in case your computer breaks down. Okay. And make sure other family members have it as well. My one cousin did such an amazing job of blogging this stuff and saving it and making sure other family members have it. It's wow. I mean, it's so amazing. She has found articles from way back, old pictures from old newspapers. It's breathtaking. And then, you know, what she said 10 years ago about the Creole blood actually matches what this other relative said a couple of days ago on his podcast that he had made 5 days ago. But he had another piece of it. Okay, she had one aspect, and then he had the rest of it. You know, so, and because usually when you think of Creole, you think of Louisiana, you know, New Orleans, right? He brought the rest of it as far as bringing it to this side of the country, which I didn't know, right? Now, I want to say this also. Now, these current books that we have with people writing about understanding the brain and neurodivergence, this is really important. I found some information about the family about 2 months ago, where in the census, this is on my father's side of the family, the census taker categorized some family members as being like addle-brained, right? Or, oh, this person's simple, or what were some other really horrible terms. But you know, on that, and this goes back to, this was like the 1700s, 1800s, horrible. But on that side of the family, people are today, people are, including myself, people are neurodivergent. You know? And basically the people were written off as being like worthless. And epilepsy runs on that side too. And you know, so today we know that there are comorbidities, you know, like I'm neurodivergent and I have epilepsy. So I was like, okay, wow, it goes all the way back, but look how people basically said, okay, this person can't work, they're worthless. Today we have people like Dr. Lois V. Green, who writes about adults who are on the spectrum. We need books like this as a modern day reference for how to deal with and respectfully honor adults on the spectrum, because we still have people who don't get the spectrum. Okay. So to have a better understanding also of how far back neurodivergence goes in your family, it's worthwhile going back and digging in the old censuses. What's the plural of census? Okay. See, like I just opened up to where it says, the call for change, a system that supports, not punishes, right? She's the system that criminalized autism instead of supporting it. This is a really excellent book. It really is. I highly, highly recommend it. But, you have to advocate for change in the way that your family perceives neurodivergence, because I guarantee you that it's something that goes far back, and then all the way back in ancient Kemet, it was recognized as sacred illness, and in many parts of the motherland, it was sacred illness. It was not miscategorized as the way it came to be from people who were truly ignorant. Okay. Now, also, as far as contemporary understandings of our freedom fight, our struggle, and I'm talking about from the last century into today, it's important to understand that and to know that we have a generation today that is clueless. And we need to honor those pieces of history that are being lost and to continue to document them today. Dr. Willa Cofield has written a powerful book. Well, she's part of, along with Cynthia Samuelson and Mildred Sexton, the 9 o'clock Whistle, Stories of Freedom, Struggle for Civil Rights in Enfield, North Carolina. Please do yourself a favor and buy this book. She's a member of POP as well. I'm going to tell you, I'm 65 years old. I still get a knot in my stomach when I think of the experiences that I had growing up in a town where I saw crosses burning. Dr. Willa Cofield is in her 90s, and the stories that she shares as an educator going through her experiences and others also with their experiences, these stories are absolutely rich. This is also what I'm talking about in terms of lineage. This lineage is not just about family. It is also about our history and making sure that it does not get lost. You see what we are going through with trying to salvage our story. I can't stress this enough. Go back and get the stories, yes, of course, of your family so that they do not get lost. But also the immediacy of getting our stories, just like, listen, we're in Newark right now. There's stuff that literally has been whitewashed. The pier, I'm pointing because I live near the river, where stuff has been erased for the sake of tourism. The pier where the enslaved were brought in. You used to still be at least be able to still see the parts of the pier, okay, where the ships were brought in. Gone. No labeling, nothing. Many of us old heads are quite upset. We need to do something. We need to speak out. It hurts. It hurts. Oh my, I didn't even see it. All these comments over here. Anybody have anything else they want to say about this before I go any further? I want to mention this book, The African American Book of Values. Let me tell you why this book is important. This book is like gold to me. And this is for several reasons. You know, we got to a place when we started reclaiming our African culture in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and, you know, throughout, but especially in 50s and 60s and 70s, because we thought that by taking African names and reclaiming the culture in our own way here, however that looked, sometimes dignified, sometimes sloppy, you know, but we were trying to do the reclamation piece, that what we had experienced here in this country was not as valuable as the continent. I think we've got enough experience and wisdom under our belts now to realize that what we have been through has been gold. Even though we were brought here from many places, we did not come intact like in the Caribbean, where folks were brought, you know, in entire groupings, because it was believed that they would work together more happily, you know, instead of being broken up. And here we had a variety. So we were a melange, so to speak. We thought that made us less valuable, but instead it made us stronger. So we ended up not seeing that. But I think that because of that, and we've had all these years under our belts, and we have come to see that we were the keepers of the culture, and others in the motherland and also throughout the Caribbean believed that we were not as valuable. But we see now that there are people throughout the diaspora who actually look to us because we have worked so hard to reclaim the culture. And many of us ended up there were those of us who worked hard to reclaim, have held on to, but there were those who also threw out the baby with the bathwater. I think that we need to just revisit all of that. I think that we worked hard to hold on to values, but then also there were so many of us who lost our values. I think it hurts because there are many of us who didn't see the importance of etiquette. There are many of us who are ATR practitioners who still hold on to the etiquette, the protocols, you know? There are those of us who are pseudo practitioners who don't do that, who don't see the importance of that. You know, we'll have our various social groups, our activist groups, and don't hold on to the values, who don't, who don't speak to the sisters a certain way, who don't show the same level of respect. And I forgot this session to do what I usually do, which is to ask the elders for permission to speak. I don't know if there are any elders who are on older than me, but generally that's one thing that I do. The whole thing about our values, it's so important. I see that Trevor's on. I so deeply appreciate the fact that he calls to check on the elders in POP. And that's something that is so important to do. But then we have people who just speak to us any old kind of way. How we carry ourselves. We've lost the whole thing about having Sunday dinner. We've lost the checking in on one another. We've lost, like I mentioned about our sacred words in Kemetic and also in other ATRs. We value speaking to each other with a certain etiquette. And even if we are blessing each other out, we do it in such a way where you have to stop and think, did she just tell me off? There's a whole grace and talent to it, right? Oh, yes, I see that you posted this before. Queen Mother, you shared your own powerful journey of discovering your maternal lineage. What was the most surprising or impactful discovery you made, and how did it change your understanding of yourself? The most impactful. Let me just finish making my point here before I address your question, and I appreciate the question. I would like for us to re-examine our protocols and the dignity that we once had, for us to reclaim it. I know that there was a time that we used to really focus on how we looked when we walked out the door. I always remember that when my father, my stepdad, my uncles, everybody, when you came in from work, you showered or you washed up, you changed your clothes, and you put clean clothes on. When we came in from school, you washed up, you put your play clothes on, okay? And then if you had to go out, you changed your clothes again. There was a set standard because of how you saw yourself and how you portrayed yourself outside. All of this is important. And in Kemetic writings, it talks about that. In ancient African writings, in the Odu Ifa, it talks about that. And this is not about religion, this is about culture. How do you see yourself? You matter. How do you want the world to see you? You matter. This is a broken part of our lineage because of the fact that we've gotten to the place where we don't think that we matter and how the world reads you. That's part of culture. We've let ourselves get broken down. What do you believe about yourself? What do you want the world to believe about you? So to answer your question, if you can put that up again so I can just be more succinct in what you asked. Okay, so the most surprising. the Nat Turner connection. Because to me, finding that we had relatives that fought with Nat Turner, especially with Billy Artis, because it seems like he was the one that had the most moxie to fight with Nat Turner, and then to find the direct blood tie to Nat Turner. It showed me proof of who we were, because we on that side, we always had this moxie. We always had this, I'm gonna do what I want to do attitude. You know, I mean, we colored within the lines mostly, you know, but there's always been this kind of, I'll find a way to do what I want to do. I remember when my cousin passed away, my cousin Kelly, you know, and at the funeral, my family and I were sitting together, and the minister, he was saying about her, you know, he said, I don't know. There was just always this thing where she just always was just gonna do what she wanted to do. We were all just sitting there like, yeah. We've always been this dignified folk that just did what the heck we wanted to do. These free thinkers, my grandparents always challenged things like religion. My grandfather was always like, we don't know if they went up on the moon. There could have been some music, some TV studio. You don't know. You know, my grandmother was just like, do you know to believe that with religion? You don't know. They taught us to challenge and question everything, right? Which was a lot for back then. A whole lot. What was that, Robin? What was that you had asked? You had said? You said earlier you had known some parts of your heritage earlier. You would not have selected certain partners. Does knowing make you more reluctant or just aware? I want to say this because I don't want to make it seem like I didn't want my children. Okay. They're the same way. I'm saying, though, that my partners, it would have made me I don't think they were worth being in my family. I think I put up with a lot from them that I didn't deserve to put up with. Aside from the fact that all of them were abusive. And I'm not saying I'm being elitist. I would have had a different sense of self-worth. If I could have done some kind of immaculate conception and had my children, then I would. My children are amazing people. They are, you know. The one good thing I can say that I got from all my relationships, you know, any of my relationships was, you know, my first husband, I got my children, you know, that's all I can say. Having owned Akeru New African Network and written for various publications, how do you believe media can be most effectively used to promote cultural awareness and the importance of knowing one's lineage? Wow, that's a good question. You know, my focus, because I was raised on Black media, I was raised watching Like It Is. I was raised on all the Black TV shows that they put on at God knows how early it was in the morning, you know, because they didn't think it was worth putting on in prime time, except for Like It Is, which they shuffled around, you know, on Sundays, depending on if some game was on or not. But um, um, uh, rich programming. I mean, really, the thing that I learned was to use Black media to teach our culture and history, right? And my mother took the time to. She always bought us books, always, and I think what needs to happen now, because social media is great for teaching our history, but there needs to be a weeding out process, because a lot of people don't know that what is produced on AI is not always authentic. There's a lot of garbage that comes out of AI. And a lot of people think that stuff is true. Like I'll even hear some really great documentary audio, but the imagery does not match, because people don't realize that what AI produces is not historically correct all the time. So that's a problem. There was, oh my goodness, the best radio documentary show I ever heard was brother come on now. His show was on BAI, Blessings Upon His Memory. His name was Dred Scott Keys. He had the absolute best radio documentary ever. It was outstanding. Blessings upon his memory. The quality, the time that went into it, the editing, it was unbelievable. And and of course, like it is, Gil Noble's show is just like just unbelievable. But I think that yes, it is a valuable opportunity right now with the podcasts and so forth that are on, for the people who have a real voice, who know what they're talking about, and who are taking the time for really quality educating, because they recognize that it is it's worth it and it is necessary. There are those who are trying, but who have not really been exposed to quality Black education. Okay. When I created Akeru New African Network, it was because it was really like a love letter. It was an homage to get to Gil Noble and Like It Is. Like when I created when I created Like It Is, when I created Ashe, that was my homage to Like It Is. Okay, that was my TV show. What I came on with Ashe as the podcast back when podcasting was in its infancy, back in the early 2000s. And then I was offered to go on Blake Radio. And that was when podcasting was in its infancy. And see, back then, I'd already done AM and FM radio. I took a little break because I was burnt out. And then I decided I wanted to get back into radio. And so podcasting had come to the fore. So I was on October Gallery radio station in Philadelphia. And then the owner decided he wanted to expand that format into the AM, the popular AM station. There was a popular Black station there at the time. And so he asked me to come on over and do that. And so I did. And because I actually developed 3 shows on October Gallery Radio. So then I was doing the AM station too. And then Blake Radio developed. He had a great station. Oh my goodness, it was great Black radio. And so then I was ready to create my own station, and I was the only Black woman to start her own station. And I wanted to be a quality Black. I wanted to be a quality Black public radio station. But 24/7 online. And I don't like doing messy, So I talked to Neil Blake about it, and he gave me the thumbs up, right? So he grandfathered me in. And so that was a beautiful experience. It was a lot of work, okay? But so I stayed with that for several years. And then Blog Talk Radio came. I put my foot in my toe in the water with that. And I syndicated my show, Shay. Then I decided, you know what, let me try TV. So I was on Princeton, their public TV for a while with Ashe. And, it was tough because my show was the only Black show. So I had a lot of resentment. People couldn't stand it because at the time my show was the best quality show on there. And so I had people sabotaging my set, and I almost got an ulcer from that. People like to think that Princeton's very liberal, but nah. So, but Ashe was my homage to Like It Is, In fact, my opening, I very deliberately did very close to the Like It Is opening as an homage, right? Yeah, it was to create a Black voice. And, when you're doing the producing and the hosting and the editing, and they tried to keep me out of the editing room. They really did. So I had somebody who was at the studio who saw what I was doing. And so she said, listen, you know what you're doing. She slipped me some professional editing tools. And she said, go edit your show. So that was my last time I was there. Because I wanted to also go on the street, right? And because I was saying, you need to get some more Black folks up in here so I can go on location. I said, I'm traveling all across the country and I want to be able to pull up my camera and talk to people, but I can't if I don't have a Black crew. So, so this woman, she gave me a DVD with the professional editing tools on it. She said, here, go do your show. So that was my last time there. And so I would just go all over the place and I would edit my show myself and I would just send it into the station, So, I got burnt out from that, but I felt really good. I felt good because I was able to create the voice that, and the quality that I wanted, and I felt like I was contributing in a way that was helpful. So for those in the audience who may be at the beginning of exploring their lineage, what initial steps would you recommend they take? What resources or methods have you found to be most helpful? Okay, so, dovetailing with what I was just saying, one of the great things is, because my kids are filmmakers too. And so they would just, go and interview people in the family, right? I would recommend you do that. And these days, you don't need any kind of highfalutin editing tools. You just take your phone and just start talking to people in your family so that you have somebody who is keeping record, right? Or if not you, then find somebody else who will do that, right? Because now, like, I'm longer in the tooth, and we have, I have a younger cousin who is really interested. And so he said, I want to open up a website. He said, you have information? I said, listen, I got tons of stuff, right? So just like when I found the podcast the other day with that relative, I right away, I sent him the link. I said, guess what? This is a relative of ours, okay? So, just start with gathering information and see if there's somebody else in the family that wants to help you. It becomes a project. If you get a bunch of people who are interested on board, then it's great. And so that's the easiest way that you can do it. And then Googling your family name, you'd be surprised how much stuff you find. You'd be absolutely surprised. There are free genealogy sites. There are, believe it or not, so many things that list information about free people of color. There are so many names Um, there's information also, if you look up about Melungeon, these were listed as free people of color. And that's Melungeon. That's a whole fascinating thing. There's more information online about Melungeons than there were. No, wait. Let me clarify that. Melungeons are a blend, almost kind of like a melange of people who were first said to be a mix of like Portuguese, Brazilians, Native Americans, Africans. That's a whole other thing. And then the government came and removed a bunch of stuff from online. There's a whole bunch of stories about how we got here and traits. Then it was said there was a myth. Now it's like, okay, they're the Creoles. Then there are people who say, it's just a whole lie. Then it's like, they're the free people of color. You'll find so much genealogy information regarding the Melungeons. Okay, I just want to put that out there too. It's really interesting. Mostly located around like in Tennessee, in Carolinas. But I want to throw that out there too, because you'll find information that's with the same names that are tied in with the Melungeons are tied in with people who are native to this land. And also who, just look it up. Just look it up. That's another whole thing. Okay. There's so much, there's some information that then you'll find that there's some, it's like a waxing and waning thing where there'll be a lot of information, then all of a sudden it like dries up, and then there's a lot. But also you'll find a lot of information, believe it or not, on Facebook. There are groups and people who put information that's up there. Okay. And I think that's those are all good places to start. What are some of the other put genealogy groups online. I mean, look it up online. You Google genealogy groups. There's an awful lot of information. Awful lot. Sometimes you can get overwhelmed, believe it or not. Just take a little breather. And then also you'll find that there are relatives, believe it or not, who write. You'll find stuff on YouTube. And if you find people with the same last name, don't be afraid to reach out to them. Could you elaborate on how Kemetic spiritual practices and your various initiations? I'm very much initiated. A lot of traditions have deepened your understanding of lineage and its significance. That's a really good question. Are there specific Kemetic concepts or stories that illustrate this? Okay. Yeah. Okay, so I am initiated into a couple of lineages. And if you're in an ATR or African traditional religion, lineage is everything. Everything. And here's why. Especially in this day and age, there are people who pop up and are self-declared. That means you don't know who their teachers are. You don't know if they've had teachers. You don't know if they've graduated. And let me tell you, there is a young man who had all of 2 classes with me. He did not graduate, He was baptized with one group that I graduated. They had a year of training with me. They graduated. He did not. He got in the water and came out and was supposed to continue classes. He had 2 classes. He was so obnoxious, the entire temple voted to kick him out. And we did. He went out and set up a shingle and told everybody that he was my initiate and he graduated. That he graduated. I didn't know this. I found out 10 years later, 10 years. He was initiating people and charging people $10,000. I don't even do that. We don't do that in our tradition. He was making gobs of money. I was trying to figure out how to pay my phone bill. He was ripping people off. He was telling people to put my picture on their shrine and pray to me like I was some dead saint. I found out when somebody finally reached out to me and told me and asked me if he was my student, if he was initiated, if he was a minister under our tradition. And I was like, oh my God. I had to make a public announcement. It's one of my highest rated videos I'd ever made. People felt so bad. It still gets a lot of hits. Lineage is everything because it legitimates you. It's the same as if somebody claims that they're a member of your family and they're not. Because people can get hurt, you know? So to say that you graduated from this person, that you had tutelage under this person, that you have been under this person's temple, and this person, okay? My lineage is through this. Okay, my godfather, or a Tefnitshur, as we call it in the tradition, that means godfather, is Grandmaster Cam from the Shrine of Ptah. No, from the Shrine of Khepra. His godfather is through the Shrine of Ptah, okay? And also, my godmother is through the Sacred White Lotus. And also, you know, it goes on and on. I have 3 other lineages, okay? Also, I am a Nganga through the Shona and the Bele South African tradition, through Don Miguel Ortiz Hill and Baba Mandaza Kandemwa, okay? And I mean, it goes on and on and on, you know? And so this legitimizes you. And also, if you're able to go on and talk without like looking in a book and, you know, to show that you know, right? And where this is your life, it is in you blood and bone, right? Because there are so many phonies that are out here today. And being an Ankh, a double Ankh carrier, you earn these. There are people who go out and just have these made. All right, if you have not earned it, then this is just a big hunk of jewelry. There's a purpose in these. These are healing wands. But also there's a status with these. You earn these. And there is the whole thing about the reclamation of being an Ankh carrier. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. Okay, so yes, there are stories that are connected to this. And There's a story regarding initiation that people don't realize is an initiation story. It's about the shipwrecked sailor. I just shared this story recently. We went through this in our ASCAC group. I know the ASCAC, ASCAC, that's the Association for the Classical Study of Ancient African Civilizations. Many people think that it's just some fanciful story. And it seems to be, but no, it's actually a story about the process of initiation. And there's another story about a prince whose father dies, and he runs away because his brother is about to take the throne. He's afraid his brother is going to kill him for some reason. He runs away to a foreign land, and the king in this foreign land, he tells him, okay, look, I know who you are. Don't be afraid. I'm not going to kill you. All right. But stay here. I'll take care of you. Don't worry. I got you. And he encourages him to marry his daughter. He says, you want kings, you want to flourish, you want kids, you want to flourish. Don't worry. You marry my daughter, you can have kids, and I'll give you a fancy position. Don't worry. I'll take care of you. I got you. He lives there for many years, but it's not his way. Right? And so after many years go by, and he's set up. He could have stayed there. But after a while, he's like, this is not me. It's not my lineage. It's not my lifestyle. And yeah, I'm comfortable here and everything like that, but these aren't my clothes. It's not my culture. And so he sends a courier back. He writes a letter to his brother who's on the throne. And even though it's been like 40 years, and he says, listen, I want to come home. If you'll have me, please. I hope you'll have me because I want to die in my land. Please take me back. So after some time, the courier comes back. The letter from his brother says, come home. You can die in your land. We'll honor you. Come home. So he's so excited. He does the happy dance, right? And he leaves everything behind. He leaves his family. He makes sure that everybody's set up, but he leaves everything, all of his wealth, all the positions. He makes sure everything's divided up. He just leaves because he wants to go home. He goes home. He's all different. And he goes back to the court, and they're all like, who's this? And his brother's on the throne, and he busts on him for a while. He's like, oh, who are you? He spends time cutting him down, Who you say you are? Oh, what? He knows good and well who it is, but he's got to spend some time like. But then he's like, oh, okay, look. Yeah, he tells his people, I'll go clean him up, and then bring him back, And he tells his brother, look, I told you can come back. It's not a problem. After all, you're my brother. Yes, you can die here because this is your land and this is your lineage, right? And he gives him a position. And the story goes that when he died, he was given a prince's funeral, and he was buried with dignity because, after all, culture and lineage matter. There are other stories like that. The whole thing with the importance of honoring your culture and your dignity, and how he was just so heartbroken at the notion, like, well, man, I'm going to die soon. I don't want to die here. I want to die in the way of my ancestors. I don't want to be buried in some mat and stuck in the ground. I want the royal treatment of my ancestors, So to answer your question, yes. And we had a memorial recently for one of our elders who passed away. It was a little controversial because he was cremated, and some people in our tradition don't do that, but it's a very personal thing. But it was a big deal to give him a righteous memorial service with all of the sacred words and ceremony and all of that, and we get dressed in our seshbet, our sacred whites, and I was sitting here thinking in terms of myself. I practice several traditions, and I'm a Manbo Asogwe, in Vodun. What's important to me, the most sacred and wonderful initiation that I had was in the Shona Ndebele tradition. It was magical. It was absolutely the most beautiful. And it's not because of all the regalia and all of that. It was mystical. It was sacred. It was, oh gosh, it was just absolutely beautiful. And it wasn't about reading a bunch of stuff. It wasn't about, it was ultimately, this is being about Nganga. And Nganga is recognized also in the Haitian Vodun tradition. Okay, it's about service. Ultimately, if you are in priesthood, it is about service. It is not about the grandiosity. It's not. And not saying that being a queen mother means nothing to me. It does. Ultimately, it just means more work, to be very honest with you. This is about service to your community. And that's part of lineage as well, if you ask me what out of all of the initiations that I've been through, and going through the Vodou initiation, that was about lineage too. But when I came to find out that the Nganga initiation was a full circle thing in terms of lineage, it's about it's about service. Okay. So I think when people find out about their ancient spiritual traditions, and they might find it fulfilling because they might find out that their ancestors did it, and they find out that this is a continuation of whatever pattern of service that they did, it might make absolute sense to them. And the initiations that I've done in the Shona tradition, the water spirit tradition is what it is, have proven to be the most beautiful because it is a healing tradition, and also, again, service to the community. So anyway, I hope that answered your question.
Yes, most certainly. And honestly, I must just express my gratitude for you coming to share with us today. Certainly sharing much about even your own personal journey with identifying and learning your lineage and the cultural facets that make you who you are. And so I'm really grateful that you have shared with us today. I do have a couple final questions to pose before I let you go, but I do want to begin first by saying that it is important that as a people that we begin to unearth these untold aspects of our history so we have a better understanding of who we are. There's a saying that I often go to. It says, and a people untethered to their history are a people destined to repeat its cycles, unaware of the lessons etched in their very being. And then there's another that says, without the compass of our past, we navigate the present without direction, and we face the future without a true sense of self. So with those two profound truths that resonated with me as you were speaking, my question to you is, what are your hopes for the future in terms of cultural awareness and the recognition of the importance of lineage, particularly for individuals within the African diaspora?
That we're able to embrace without fear or without prejudice. I understand that we're all in different places and that we're all okay. My aunt sends me beautiful text messages every morning, and they're Christian messages. And so I reply with, Christian messages. I'm not gonna try to send her something that, I'm just glad that we're in touch with each other every morning, and I'm an interfaith minister as well.
Right.
So it would be very haughty of me to try to send something that steps outside of her belief system. Listen, I ain't got no problem with Jesus. Jesus is a word that exists in the Kemetic language, right? But also, we see the thread, right. and so I'm not trying to be I'm not being hypocritical. I find something that's beautiful and send it back to her. She sends me 8 messages, I send her 3 with green little hearts after it every morning,
Yes.
Yeah. So, I'm just hoping that we're all able to come to a place of respecting each other and loving each other and being able to communicate with each other and uphold each other. That's what's important, because we need one another, and so, I've been in interfaith groups where I've gotten completely just bashed, thank God we're not like those evil Egyptians. And I've had to say, excuse me,
Wow.
I don't bash your religion. And actually, your religion came out of mine.
Yeah. There's definitely something to be said about acceptance and seeking to understand, as opposed to putting up walls where they really needn't exist. I would be remiss if I didn't say that you really remind me of a family member of mine. Her name is Carolyn Jenkins. And, not only do you favor one another, but the spirit is similar, the way that you guys approach life, all very similar. I'm hoping that she sees this. I'm going to show her if she hasn't. But we never know. I also have Andersons, so there could be some.
Hey.
She
a free spirit too?
She is, definitely.
I'm a self-disciplined free spirit. It's kind of oxymoronic, but still, because people will say, you seem like you're kind of like a tough free spirit,
Yes. So before we close, I do want to ask, so I give the viewers an opportunity to learn, where can people find you if they want to follow you or learn more about the work that you're doing and the incredible work that you're pressing forth in the lives of people that you touch each day?
Absolutely. Well, again, I want to thank you for having me on, and it's been a pleasure and an honor to be here. And people can visit my website at www.imakhu.com. And you can just put that up on the screen for me, please. And again, let me just remind you, if you want to sign up for my Embrace Your African Culture Without Being Misled class, then you can just hit me up. And in fact, if you reach out to me today, then you can get it at 50% off. It's going to be $150 for the 10-week class, but if you sign up today, you can get it for $75 for the 10-week class. Also, there are African dolls that you can get, my handmade African dolls, and also reach out for my books, my literature, and my music at my website.
Awesome. I was a little reluctant to list it. I don't know if I got it right. I typed in Imahku.com.
Yes, Imahku.com. Imakhu.
Okay. All right. It just couldn't be reached when I was trying it, but it could be my browser. Okay. Very good. So I did post that here for all of our, it says error code. Wait a moment. Okay. For all of our viewers, You can find.
I said, oh, my bad. I said .com and it's .info.
Okay. All right. I'm going to delete that so that we don't send folks the wrong place. So it's .info. Thank you so much. Let's see.
And I also want to say, I really don't. I just announced last week, I don't refer to myself as Kemetic anymore. I am a Shenuist. Shenu is a Kemetic word, and it means to bring things full circle. And so it is Kemetic, but it is a more defined term.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Well, there you have it. We have the Reverend Queen Mother Imakhu, who can be found online at our website at imahku.info. That is www.imakhu.info. This has been an enlightening experience, and I'm so grateful that you have come to share with us today. I hope this won't be the last time, because I know that it's much more.
I'm glad to come back.
Awesome. Well, we will remain connected with you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again so much for joining us today. We are Frontiers International Plainfield Area Club, and we have just brought you another edition in our Westry Horne Cultural Heritage Lecture Series. Today, with the importance or why knowing your culture and your lineage, it matters. And this is such an essential topic. And so we do hope that you all will take note and will learn from what you have heard today and really govern yourselves accordingly to really try and reconnect with what might have otherwise been lost or hidden, so that you can reclaim what is yours and rightfully carry forward the legacy of your ancestors. Collectively, we are one, and we certainly must continue to charter a path forward that even our next generations can follow after. And we can only do this when we make the connections that are necessary so that we are impactful in all of our areas of work. I am Safir Jenkins, Frontiers International Plainfield Area Club. We thank you again for joining us. And as indicated earlier, if you are interested in partnering with us, you can certainly support our work or donate to our scholarship fund online at bit.ly/Plainfield Frontiers donate. Or you can mail checks payable to Frontiers International Plainfield to P.O. Box 428, Plainfield, New Jersey, 07061. We stand for advancement through service, and we appreciate your partnership. Signing off. Have a wonderful day.